through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know His name.
I've had many tears and sorrows. I've had questions for tomorrow. There have been times I didn't know right from wrong. But in every situation, God gave me blessed consolation that my trials only come to make me strong. And now we sing through it all. Through it all, I've learned
to trust in Jesus.
I've learned to trust.
Trust in God.
So we sing through it all. Oh,
Through it all,
I'm learning to depend upon His word.
Hector, can I help you sing that? So I thank God for the mountains,
Yeah.
and I thank Him for the valleys, and I thank Him for the trials He's brought me through.
Yes.
For if I never had a problem, I'd never know that God could solve them. I'd never know what faith in God can do. That's the reason I say that
through it all,
all through it all, oh, I've learned.
trust in Jesus.
Oh, yes, I've learned.
Trust in God.
Through the storm and rain,
Through it all,
oh, yes, through it all, oh, I've learned. Lift your voice, sing it one more time, say through it all, through every situation, yes, I've learned to put my trust in Jesus. I've learned to put my trust in God, yes, through it all, through everything, yes, through it all. Oh, yes, I've learned to depend upon His word. I have learned. I've learned to depend on Him. I've learned to trust in Him. Oh, yes, I've learned to depend upon His word. So good. So good. I can depend on you, Jesus. Yes, God. I can trust in you.
I can trust in God.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
But I can't depend on nobody else.
You're a good, good Father.
I can depend on you, Jesus.
Good,
Through it
good.
all,
You understand me.
I can depend on you.
You understand me.
Through it all, my eyes are on you.
Yeah.
Through it all, it is well.
My. Yes. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, it is well. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Is it well with you? Is it well? Hey, we working through grief. We giving ourselves permission to grieve. And I can't think of a better theme to walk through grief is knowing that it is well. Yo, not only it is well, we're going to get back into this grief thing. But before we start today, Randa, our consummate note taker, behind the scenes producer, coordinator, director, tell everybody what to do. It is her birthday. So everybody give love to Randa Hinton. It is her birthday today. She is 30. She's left the 20s and she's into the beautiful season of 30s. Yo, 30s is a good time. 30s is a good time. It's you really discover yourself in your 30s. It's when the confidence and the independence really kicks in. And for Randa, that's a whole lot, because if her confidence is just now kicking in, oh my God, what is it going to look like on the other side, right? But 30 is a good decade, yo. So welcome to the 30s. Randa, you're catching up with us. Yo, welcome to Good News Today. Got the theme song? Like to hear it? Here it go. Let's go! Hey!
Joy, pain, ups, downs are working all day. Everything's gonna be okay. Gonna hear some good news today.
Come on.
Oh, joys, pains, ups, downs are working all day. Everything's gonna be okay.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son,
Everything's gonna be okay.
that whosoever will believe in him shall not perish but have
Everything's gonna be okay.
everlasting life.
Gonna hear some good news today.
Yo, turn my mic up. Y'all ain't see this coming.
Get ready to catch this. Come to set your righteous mind, not your edges. God is the goal, and then there's the period. This thing is real. Woo, child, we serious.
Intentional, original. God is in control. Do it for your soul. Gotta let the whole world know.
Hey, bars. He's got bars.
Everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. Gonna hear some good news today.
Yo, everything's gonna be okay. Let the people say, God's gonna make a way. Everything's gonna be okay. Put it in the comments. Tell somebody everything's gonna be okay. Encourage somebody. Tell somebody everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Yo, we were looking at Exodus 16. God delivered the children of Israel from Egypt. And we see them in chapter 16, 2.5 months after seeing one of the greatest miracles, greatest breakthroughs, one of the greatest things they'd ever seen. We see them and they are grumbling. Now, I make the argument that grumbling is just a symptom of a deeper problem, which is they're grieving. They're grumbling as a result because they are, in fact, grieving. And grieving is something that, honestly, yesterday we said we got to give each other permission to do, permission to grieve. I got several notes from several of you yesterday that just said you took time and grieved some things that you just hadn't stopped to grieve in a long time. And to be honest, we should do this probably on a regular basis. We experience things that are worthy of grieving probably more often than we like to think, more often than we acknowledge or recognize. And the culture just tells you to keep going. The society just tells you just to keep going. And I'm telling you, you've got permission to stop. As a matter of fact, you need to stop and just grieve. We even talked about scheduling grief. Scheduling grief. Grief is a necessary process. Grief is a necessary process where you have to stop and lament what you missed, what you lost, a season that was devastating. Don't miss the opportunity to grieve. Here's the word, though. The children of Israel were grieving the loss of what was familiar to them. Y'all walk with me up in here. They were grieving the loss of what was familiar and the challenge of now trying to walk with the one who's now been faithful. Just because he's faithful don't mean he's familiar. Just because God is faithful, it doesn't mean that God is familiar. Some of you, the faithfulness of God is taking you to some very unfamiliar places. And it's challenging and it's hard. If we're to be honest, sometimes we have the thought in mind that is that I'd rather stay with the devil I do know than the God I'm trying to discover. I know, y'all can just be quiet on me if you want to, but let's just be honest. Sometimes we'd rather go with the devil that we know. At least I know this. I know this. I know what this gonna do. Following God, He got me going through Red Seas. He got me going through places. He got me doing stuff I don't even believe I can do. I'm struggling with my insecurity with Him. Sometimes the devil that I know is more comforting than the God I'm seeking to discover. So the children of Israel, in a moment of weakness, in a moment of struggle, in a moment of insecurity, they were grieving the loss of the familiarity of Egypt. At least Egypt was familiar. I knew we was going to get beat. I knew we was going to work all day, and I knew we was going to come home and eat good food. It's amazing what you can allow, the level of abuse you can allow yourself to get comfortable with just because it's familiar. Familiarity can be a very dangerous thing because sometimes you'll choose what's familiar over one who's been faithful. So they're grieving. I think what's important to note here, because many of us have been through some things, I think it's important to note what they're grieving. Watch this. They're grieving a loss. And God responds to their grieving. Watch this now. Stay with me. I'm about to make a turn. Stay with me. Lean in. Lock in with me. God responds to their grieving with manna in the morning, meat at night. So He responds to their grieving with grace. He responds to their grieving with grace. Now, here's the thing about their grieving that's disturbing. Here's the one thing about their grieving that we should take note of. They were grieving a loss, and the loss wasn't even good. So they were grieving the loss of something that wasn't even good. They're grieving the loss of of their own enslavement. What am I trying to say? I'm saying some of you need to grieve stuff that you lost and it wasn't even good. You should have lost it. And because it was so bad, you didn't even grieve it. But hey, it was still a loss. Some of you got out of a bad relationship and you should have, but you didn't grieve it. Well, why would I be grieving that? Hey, sometimes you got to grieve things that you lost, even if they wasn't good. It was still familiar. It was still you. You still had memories, and you got to grieve. You got to process that thing. You got to process the ending. Endings are necessary. And the grieving puts a salah, a period. It puts an ending to that season. And if not grieved properly, you gotta have a proper burial. You gotta say goodbye. Now, this is not cultural closure. Closure means I need to call them and talk about it. This closure requires them. Grieving just requires you and God. So this ain't an excuse for you to call him back. This is an excuse for you to call God in. Did you get what I just said? I said, this ain't an excuse for you to call them back. This is an invitation for you to call God in. Let me call God into this thing and let me grieve that season of hell. Some of you went through a hellish season. It was drugs. It was sex. It was relationship. It was foolishness. It was marked with all kinds of stuff. And you just said, I'm just moving on. The problem is if you don't pronounce a benediction over that thing, if you don't pronounce an ending over that thing, and if you don't grieve the loss, it needs a necessary ending. It needs a culmination. Here's why. If you don't grieve the loss properly and end it in your spirit, I said end it in your spirit, in your soul. You need to end that season in your soul. Grieving, you need to end it lest instead of grieving a loss, your loss becomes a longing. So instead of grieving the loss is just laid there, not appropriately ended, not the necessary burial. And that loss over time, if left unattended, will become a longing. And you'll find yourself like the children of Israel, watch this, longing for what you lost. And you're sitting in freedom, but the enemy has so perverted your mind and you have not properly grieved the season of sin and slavery properly, so that now you're sitting in freedom, but it feels like bondage because you didn't grieve what you lost. And now your loss has become a longing and your freedom feels like bondage. Are y'all in here with me? Are y'all in here with me? You gave it up, sacrificed it, came out of that slavery, got freedom, but now you're fiending. Can I get a Jodeci witness in here? Got me fiending. I know that was in two different keys, as just diversity. Two of them really, I just couldn't hit that. I just couldn't hit it. So now you're fiending. Now you're fiending. And when you're fiending, what does it feel like? It feels like I'm sitting over here free, but it feels like I'm locked up. It feels like I'm in bondage. I feel like I'm in bondage. And now you're starting to long for what you lost when you should have did a proper burial of that season that you was in, a proper ending. See, grieving helps you walk through a place of maturity and understanding. So when the temptation of longing comes, you're like, nah, I've grieved that thoroughly. I know what that was, and I pronounced an ending on that thing. But if you mess around and just go from one crisis to another and jump from season to season, and you just running and you don't stop and take time to grieve, Slow down. Move too fast. Slow down. You're moving too fast. Y'all remember Lot's wife? Remember how Lot's wife, they was leaving? They said, you got to take up and leave where you are. You got to go. You got to go. It's interesting. Back in the culture, in their cultural time, salt was used as a preservative. Salt was used as a preservative. So salt in that time would use, they didn't have deep freezers. They didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have all that stuff. They didn't have, coolers and ice packs and free. No. Salt is how you preserve the meat. So they discovered that if you pack it in salt, it would preserve it. It would keep it fresh. It'll. I don't know if they use the word fresh, but it'll keep it from going bad. It would preserve it. So salt was a preservative. Now Lot's wife was leaving, and she looked back, and her looking back was an outward expression of her inward posture and reality. And when she looked back, what did God turn her into? A pillar of salt. Why? Because she was longing and trying to preserve something that she should have been grieving in loss. She was longing and preserving when she should have been losing and grieving. Y'all in here? You're preserving a season. You're preserving a relationship. Some of you are preserving a lifestyle. You're preserving a season. And it's a loss. And you better grieve it so that you can move on to what God has for you, lest you find yourself out of Egypt, but Egypt still in you, and you're living like a slave when you've been granted full freedom. Some of you need to grieve what you lost, even if what you lost wasn't good. Still grieve it, move through it, lest you be tempted to go back to it. Did y'all hear what I said? Grieve it, move through it, lest you be tempted to go back to it. If you don't grieve the loss may become a longing. And you may find yourself longing for something that really should have been dead and buried. It just needed to be grieved. It's over. They're gone. Even an abuse that happened to you, grieving the loss of a level of innocence and safety, grieving that and moving on, lest you be held hostage to the abuse that has happened to you, lest you be held hostage to what somebody else did to you. No, grieve through it, lest you have to go back to it. Don't preserve, release. God's got something so much better on the other side. God's got the healing. Because here's the thing. Here's a word. Here's a word. Go through the process, because you can mess around and heal, but watch this. You can heal wrong. You can heal wrong. Ask somebody that don't follow the doctor's instructions about resetting a leg or resetting an arm. That thing can heal wrong. And if it heals wrong, it has to be rebroken and put back. And you got to go through the process of healing all over again. Some of you are stuck in a cycle because, yeah, you healed, but you healed wrong. You tried to heal on your terms and not with God's Spirit. And I'm telling you, healing is yours, but healing has to be found in God. It's Wednesday. I figure we can go a little deep today. Come on to the deep end of the pool. So healing is necessary in this season. So give yourself space to grieve. Give yourself space to sit and mourn what you've lost. Mourn the change of the season. Mourn the dynamics and the realities that are devastating you. It's okay to get before God and have permission to cry, lament, to grieve. And know that on the other side of that is the healing hand of God. He wants to meet you. Don't be like Lot's wife. You'll try to preserve a former season and you'll wonder why you walk around salty with God. I'll see y'all tomorrow.